thank you everybody for being here. My name is Whitney Ziegler. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Rocks Organizing. Thank you for coming to our monthly Ask the Organizer event. This month in honor of National Book Lovers Day, which is this Friday, August 9th. Our team is going to be, and you too, discussing a book called How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis. Thank you, Karen. It's a little backwards on Zoom, but thank you. Oh, there we go. Even if you haven't had a chance to finish reading the book or to read it at all, I encourage you to be here and participate today because I think there'll be a lot of great takeaways from our discussion. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in? Would anybody like to share one of your key takeaways or one of your thoughts about the book right off the bat?
Oh.
It's like deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll kick it off. So one of the main points that Casey talks about in her book is that chores or care tasks, as she refers to them, are morally neutral. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that. Got such a quiet group today.
Yeah. I haven't
Well,
had a chance to dive into the books. I don't know too much about this topic yet.
okay. Well, something, one of the big points in the book is that, you know, we can judge ourselves as being bad people for not getting a chore or a care task done. Like, I didn't do the dishes, I'm a bad person, I'm lazy, I'm a slut, all this negative self-talk. But she says, take that away. You know, care tasks, chores are morally neutral, right? It's not positive, it's not negative, they're just there. So if we can take the shame and the stigma and take the weight out of that, how does that change your perception around care tasks?
Without
thing
having
I
even
like,
read the book, I could tell you it would change my attitude toward myself. I would be less hard on myself.
Nice.
yeah,
I've
kind of
heard
on that same note, there was a section that was saying if you're completing your care tasks from motivation of shame, then you probably are also relaxing in shame. So it's kind of that switch of like, when you stop, for the day, give yourself time to relax. Are you actually relaxing? Or are you still thinking about all the things you haven't done and still kind of judging yourself for that?
Yeah, have to agree with that.
Yeah, I
And
think we all judge ourselves very harshly. And, if we were to see a loved one in the same scenario with dishes piling up, we certainly wouldn't speak to them the way that we speak to ourselves. And I think it's important to give ourselves permission to rest and permission to fall behind on things. And, I think it should be a moral exception because it falls into self-care. And if your body's not wanting to do the dishes, there's probably a reason. It probably needs to rest.
I thought it was interesting. She talked about, I feel like maybe there were a couple of things, but the one I'm specifically remembering is exercise. Like she changed her view on exercise and then just like didn't exercise for, I don't know, 2 months or something, and then like found that she had a new motivation to do it and got back into it in a way that was like much more pleasurable and um, natural in her routine. And I guess I've heard people say that about like, um, I don't know, letting yourself like eat sugar again after not or something. Like you kind of want to go all in for a little while and then you sort of find that balance. So I think it was interesting to read about how many things might happen that way.
yeah,
I liked the whole perspective of the book was really interesting because unlike other books we've read about organizing, she's not an organizer, and she is very disorganized. And she comes about it in a whole different way that I think really speaks to people who are not naturally organized. And I personally got a lot out of it. I thought she was really interesting, very forgiving of herself and others. And that's a good lesson.
You very much felt like giving yourself grace is what I got about giving yourself grace throughout all your tasks, like, and that kind of care for yourself, that you're allowed to do this and not have it bother you.
We have a comment in the chat from Laura who says, one of my takeaways is don't buy and laminate a bunch of her printables and then not use them. You have some smiley face reactions to that. I'm curious, what other key takeaways did people have from the book? Or if you haven't read the book yet, do you have questions for people in the room who have?
I do like what she has to say about kind of giving a gift to your future self by doing the closing tasks for the day. I like that idea of thinking about how will your future self respond when they find this done.
Absolutely. I was sorting tax files with a client the other day, and we were keeping personal ones for 7 years and business ones for 10 years. And we had written notes to ourselves 4 years ago, like, shred this file in 2024. So it was really nice to just pick up that file. We didn't even need to look at it again because we've been kind to our future selves by leaving that note, that little breadcrumb. So we just threw it in the shredding box. So, it could be something that small, but it's like, yes, thank you. Didn't even remember doing that.
I
Yeah,
like when she said that stop caring for your home. It's an inanimate object, but instead you have to, 'cause you are a person and you deserve to be cared for. So, but also kind of point on to, um, one way of caring for yourself is to have a comfortable home and healthy and also a safe place to live in. So it's kind of like in a circle.
That's a really good point, Jean. Thank you.
I kind of liked her. I guess I'm paraphrasing this, but somewhere in the book she said, anything that's worth doing is worth doing halfway. And then, of course, she gave tips for how you can organize and eventually get it done. But she had so many ways of making you feel like you were fine, no matter how you approached your work. As long as you were making progress, you were fine. And never lazy. I like that. She said there's no such thing as lazy. There's only lack of support, illness, depression, things like that. Not lazy though.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess that message that it's not a moral failing, I think is really important because we are often so hard on ourselves. And that perfectionist thing, which just sort of, you could either do a really short burst in a way that works for you, or you could agonize over the fact of all the things you're not doing and then just not get anything done and be paralyzed and overwhelmed. So this felt like, yeah, I like what you said, breadcrumbs or something, just like a way in, a little crack in the tunnel of doom around all the house things. And the detangling of the hair, that was really sweet. There's like little sweet aspects that, when you're really down and really in that place where you can't really see a way out, it's really important to find the little smallest bit. If you can't do it, it means it's too big of a chunk. Like how much can break it down. So I felt really compassionate.
That's a good
Yeah.
point. And she's trying to ride her exercise bike for 5 minutes, and that was just too much, too big of a task. Because she found that that sweet spot was 3 minutes, and that was, she called it an on ramp, to getting the task done. I think Karin, you talked about that too with the exercise routine. So how can we find our on ramp when things are too big or too much?
Right. And along that same line, she also said that momentum is the key. Sometimes when you get started, like the 3 minutes, feel like you can go on and then you can do more. It's just hard to get started sometimes. That is so true.
Yeah, it is. I like that part too. And I liked her 5 steps to a tidy house. But her most important point was you don't have to do all 5 steps. If you can do the first one, which is picking up trash, good for you. If you want to get to another one today or tomorrow or not, that's fine too. And I think just taking those baby steps, that's how she had a term for it. I can't remember it. But it's, building momentum. And it was just a very compassionate way to look at your own home.
I liked it that she had that list, and there was always something on the list that she didn't do, and she never did. She never finished it. And so in order to make her list so that she would always complete it, she took that item off the list. And then she was able to.
That's good. It's like that dopamine hit. You check it off the list is done.
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
I also like when she said that being organized doesn't need to be Instagrammable. As long as you know where it is and it works for you, then you're organized.
absolutely.
Yeah, that was a good point. It doesn't have to be perfect or pretty. You just have to know how to find what you're looking for.
What other nuggets came out of this for you? I'm curious.
I enjoyed the section on the laundry.
You want to tell us more about it?
There's definitely a basket just filled with clean clothes behind me that I have not folded. But sometimes, I do get to that where I halfway do it. I'll just hang up the clothes parts of it and it feels like I got a little bit done. Or some days I'll just do the folded clothes and we'll get to hanging later, just like when I'm watching a show and just kind of ease my way through it. And so I feel like laundry for a lot of people, can be a very daunting task sometimes. So just doing the posher bits, but even feeling like it's fine if you just have a basket of clean clothes. You're good. At least it's, has a spot.
Yeah, and it doesn't all have to be clean at the same time. As long as you have something to wear, like, that's success.
I thought it was really helpful when she acknowledges how when she was trying to do things as she noticed they needed to happen, it was so much more difficult because then she'd be like interrupting something she was already doing and trying to get in the process of doing, oh, the dishes need to be washed, whatever this, and it was so distracting. And that just doing things sort of more on a rhythm, even if it wasn't the last possible moment that this thing needed to happen, it would happen regularly, and then it wouldn't get to be so overwhelming and distracting and have 1,000 half done things.
That makes a lot of sense. There's an organizer named Emily Lay, and she talks about the laundry mountain. How some of us, the weekends here, we got to catch up. We literally have a mountain of laundry to do. And she just kind of talks about breaking that down. Just maybe do one load per day and call it good. You don't have to tackle the whole mountain all at once and all in the same day.
Right. And she said you don't have to separate the whites from the colored things either. Just throw it all in together and turn on the cold water. That
Very
might be helpful.
I'm gonna confess, I never separate my laundry by color. Never have,
Never
never will.
separate.
Same.
Same.
Maybe it's a myth. Busted.
Or maybe back in the day, colors tended to run more in the wash than they do now. I don't know, but I've never had an issue. I can wash blacks and whites together and nothing changes colors. It's great.
Good.
Nice save there.
My partner wanted me to pre-bleach their white socks before washing the white load, and I was like, you have at it.
That was an interesting part, the section about partners. And, you know, how do you divide up chores? So it's not equal necessarily, but it's fair for everybody. I thought that whole section was fascinating.
You want to tell us a little bit more about that section, Andrea, if we haven't quite read the book yet or finished it yet?
Yeah, it just, you know, she was talking a lot about stay-at-home moms and how oftentimes the spouse believes that since they go off and work 8 hours a day, they're entitled to come home and not do any chores. But her point on that was the stay-at-home mom doesn't get the weekends off. You know, she's working all the time, and that's really not a fair division of labor. You can't divide it up that way by, you know, one person going off to work and the other person doing everything else. That's not fair, and that both people deserve to have rest. And if the person is doing all the chores, they're not getting the rest that the other person is getting. So I thought that was kind of a nice way to look at things.
Yeah, she talked about making sure the rest is equal, like the amount of rest you get being equal, which I think that does make a lot of sense and is a totally different way to think about it.
Yeah, and it was rest as in no, the kids are not going to be bugging you, or you're not doing anything with the kids. You're doing whatever it is you want to do, whatever's going to be restorative for you. And I thought that was a nice way to think about it.
We have a comment in the chat from Sarah. I separate my laundry like it's a religion. As someone with ADHD, it's a really satisfying way to feel like things are, quote, in order. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Sarah. Yeah, I think whatever works for each individual person, for each of us, right? There's no right way or wrong way to do the laundry. Well, I'm curious, what else stood out to folks? There were some things that might be a little bit controversial. Like, I'm curious, for example, what you thought about donations. And she gives people permission to just throw things away, especially if they've been sitting next to your front door for 6 months and you've been meaning to take those donations somewhere. What do you think about that? Andrea's shaking her head, no.
Yeah, that bothered me.
Yeah, I think there's so many options nowadays that it's just completely unnecessary to throw things away. There are a million free groups in almost every community across the country where you can say, hey, I have a bag of this, I'll leave it on my porch and somebody will come grab it. So there are ways around, you know, having to load it in your car and take it somewhere to get it out of your house. You can still get it out of your house without throwing it in the trash.
I'll counterpoint to that one.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was going to counterpoint to that one, which was I found that freeing because sometimes I have a gigantic pile sitting on my front porch right now of things that are useful things, but I cannot figure out who they are useful for. And because I have, you know, unloaded my parents' space and I'm still sorting through all of those things. And yeah, putting them on buy nothing doesn't seem that hard, but when you're already dealing with overwhelm, taking the time to take a picture of each of those things and then post it and then come back the next day and see who wants it and then message them and tell them they can come get it. That's work. So I mean, I'm not advocating that we should do that all of the time, but sometimes it's necessary to get yourself back to a place where you can manage it and give it away in a more fruitful manner.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is very complicated. There's a lot of steps involved in giving things away. There is a resource, I don't know if folks are familiar with it, called Just Porch It. And it's an organization, and you let them know you've got donations on your porch and they'll just come get everything. And it's free. There's also Vietnam veterans or Union Gospel Mission. So if somebody has the energy to, I guess, to schedule that one pickup, that might be a good option for folks rather than having to correspond with a lot of different people for items on Buy Nothing. Just a resource. There was another controversial idea that she shared about putting dirty dishes in with the clean ones and running the dishwasher again. And I hadn't ever thought of that, I have to admit, but I'm curious what you think about that.
I have some dishes that did not get clean enough in the last round, and I'm still trying to decide whether to wash the entire load again or take some clean ones out and put some dirty ones in. But some of those dishes are getting washed again.
Good. You could always experiment and see if they come out clean the next time.
I think it should always be the path of least resistance for folks. You know, if you're at a point where like, oh, I don't want to empty the dishwasher and there's room and there's more dishes, like just throw them in and run it again. If that's going to get you to the next step, even if it's a shortcut, then go for it, right?
My shortcut is just not judging it. Like I just run it every night, like the silly commercial that's airing about couples that do it every night. Yeah, I just run it every night, whether it's quite full or not. And I don't have to make that decision.
That's awesome. I haven't seen that commercial yet, but nice.
Oh, it's funny. It's like very euphemistic, and they've got all these couples and they're talking about doing it every night, and it's dishwashing detergent.
Very clever.
Yeah, I liked this section. I feel like it was, giving yourself that permission to not be perfect. Because if you strive to do every task perfectly, you're just going to burn out. So if that means, in your mind, you can load the dishwasher perfectly every day, but if that's causing you stress and causing you to burn out, it may not be the best way.
Any other thoughts about dishes? It seems to be, I think, something that a lot of us struggle with. And it's one of those ongoing tasks that can pile up really quickly.
When I have dishes that I don't have a dishwasher, but if I have dishes that I just won't get to right now, instead of putting them in the sink, I'll put them in the fridge because then they won't go like rotten. But if I have dishes in the sink, I'm not gonna wash the next dish. Like I'll just keep piling them on. So that way I still have a clean sink. And then when I have the energy to wash a dish, I'll pull one more out of the fridge and wash that one.
One thing she didn't address, which surprised me, is all those dishes in her sink they're not all hers. She's got a family, she's got a husband and kids. She didn't say how old her kids were, but they can put dishes in the dishwasher too. And that's sort of, I was surprised that she didn't go there.
They can also unload them. They can unload them too,
Yeah.
them away.
Yeah.
To me, that is my biggest problem because there's only me. And I find I have a hard time finding time to unload the dishwasher before I have to load it again. So I have a lot of sitting in the sink, but that kids could definitely help. I could use a kid around the house for that.
You can have one of mine.
Thank you.
Not much.
Yeah, I've got an extra one or two.
And Linda shared in the chat, her hubby does all the dishes and she cooks the meals. It's a nice way to split duties there. Thanks for sharing, Linda. What other thoughts do people have about this book or dishes or anything under the sun related to keeping house while drowning? We had a couple folks who need to leave for other appointments. Thank you for coming.
I don't think I've
wondered if,
ever read. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't think I've ever read anything that was like as sensitive to and realistic about how being depressed can feel and like how difficult things can be, like even just the give yourself permission to throw it away kind of. I think there's sort of like all these levels she's introducing of like what can you do right now, not necessarily like this is always the solution, but especially when she was talking about I thought it was a good example of like gaining momentum is like you're sitting in a chair and then you like put on a song and you like start doing a little bit of a dance and then you're like doing a full chair dance and then you can get at like the sort of the really giving yourself that much help for something that we so commonly are like, I should just be able to do this. And then you sort of get bogged down and you're like, why can't I, if you're in that place. And so I think that amount of, yeah, like that sometimes you need tools to do something that other times is really easy. And I think that that was really good to read.
Yeah, I appreciated that too. And I like the whole tone of the book. I mean, she was writing it for not only people who are like have serious problems like depression or maybe neurodivergent or something, but I think everybody, at least I know I can feel overwhelmed at times or even depressed at times, for one reason or another. And so I think this is this is a book that can be welcomed by anybody that's trying to keep house. It's very broad-minded, I thought, very for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Jean. Is there anybody we haven't heard from yet who wants to ask a question or share a takeaway from the book? We have a comment in the chat from Kathleen. I haven't read the book. Did you talk at all about how you balance the stress/guilt of how you keep up when you had a member of the family who was a hoarder who shopped obsessively and you and family repeatedly tried to assist them in managing the quote unquote clutter? Does anybody want to address this? Thank you for your question, Kathleen.
She didn't really go there, I don't think, but we read a book in our Big Rocks book club called Swedish Death Cleaning that took on that in a very nice and compassionate way, how to get rid of the stress and the guilt along with all the stuff that you end up with.
And I'm rereading your question, Kathleen. I don't, is this person still with us? Is the situation an ongoing one, or is it one that I guess is completed and now we're trying to dig out from under?
No, actually, she passed quite some time ago. Well, yeah, about 10 years ago. But the family repeatedly over the years would go in and try and help her sort through stuff and get, things together. And that kind of built up this, for my sister and I both, this obsession about how our house looks and what we keep and how we deal with it. And I was just wondering if she talked about that, because it sometimes kind of rears its ugly head and you go, okay, I'm not her. this isn't the same thing, but it's hard sometimes to let go of that. I'm not quite sure even how to describe it, that obsessiveness to not be her. That might be a good way to put it.
There is a part where she talks about, like, I wish I could find it. That's really good about how if you have experiences where the clutter or the mess is attached to those like emotional family situations and guilt and stress, then like that sort of idea of making it or trying to think of it as morally neutral was super important, because then it's like if you live in a messy house but it's safe and it's comfortable, like those things don't have. She's talking about her kids. Like, I think like, your kids aren't necessarily going to associate the mess with not being safe if those things aren't connected, and like you can kind of disconnect. Does anyone want to say more about that section?
I just re-listened to that. I had the audiobook version, and I know it's in the first 3 chapters, I think, Kathleen, but she does talk about tackling care tasks and being self-compassionate when there maybe is a family history or a history of trauma or some kind of strong emotion that's associated with how we keep our house and how we perform care tasks.
Okay. Well, I've ordered the book. I just haven't received it yet. So that'll be helpful to read. I know my sister and I both struggle with that and being a bit obsessive about things being organized, things being clean, things being, they don't, and it's an offshoot of all those years of trying to help that person and not really being successful in that regard. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And we do hear that from clients we work with pretty often about the home that they grew up in and how it influences their relationship with their things now.
Yeah.
And their environment now. And yeah, it definitely runs deep.
Definitely. Thank you.
I have a general question that isn't necessarily within the scope of the book, but of course the book is a jumping off point and that's all related. But I'm just about to face a move, and there's, probably 4 years or 5 years, no, 4 or 5 moves within the garage, unmade decisions, and then there's stuff within the actual house probably over the last 6 years it's been building. Over the last 3 years, I took care of my dad in this house. So there's some stuff. He didn't have a lot of stuff. I'm pretty much the only person in my family that's really attached to stuff and most things. And I'm a maximalist as opposed to a minimalist. And I'm having to face the fact that I'm moving into a space that has like maybe half the size of the garage, which is, I love that idea. Let's box it and bin it all up and postpone the painful decisions and the letting go of all the massive amounts of clutter of all these things that if I look at, I love them and I'm attached to them and all these memories and paper and knowledge and information versus I've lived with it without any of it for years. So I'm kind of in that place where I'm probably, very much a clutter bug and just like, I don't look anything like these. Yeah, all the channels and whatever they show you house cleaning, but the house is already immaculate and empty. And I'm just like, how do I even begin to imagine my life with what is an appropriate amount of stuff to live with? I don't even know what that feels like or what that is, but I know I'm entering a place in my life where I'm gonna need to let go of stuff to actually make this move within the next 6 weeks, and I had an organizer that I hired and talked all about emotional processing, and then came in with a big contractor's garbage bag. And she was like, I said, let's start in the bedroom because that's my least emotional. My bedroom is fine. I can face those things. And she said, let's start in the kitchen. That's the easiest for everyone. Well, that's where I made food for my dad. So she just opens a random cabinet and starts chucking things in the garbage because they looked like trash to her, and I just started crying because I need time to process. It's going to take me too long. It's going to take me a while. say I have 6 to 8 weeks, but how do I even get there? I'm so far from being able to imagine myself with less. I don't know how to let go. So I'd love to hear any ideas or insights or encouragement. I know a lot of you have been through things with stuff.
Michelle, thank you for sharing this. Sarah put some encouragement in the chat and says that can be really hard to be the odd man out in a family where others aren't sentimental. So just sharing and normalizing there.
I feel that because that is me and my family. Not always, but like with a lot of things. And I have just had to come to terms with the fact that sometimes I have to hold on to things longer than other people do. You know, like when I was done nursing my kids, I had this, adorable rocker. I don't really use it since I'm not nursing them anymore, but I was not willing to let go of that period of my life yet. And so it sat in the corner of my room for 3 years until I was like, okay, I think I'm ready now. So the challenge you have is you just have a very short timetable. So if you're somebody like me who just takes longer to process that is a daunting task you're describing. I don't know if anybody else has tips. I just have empathy.
Thank you.
Well, I'm really sorry that you had such a terrible experience with the organizer that you worked with. That's definitely not our approach at Big Rocks at all. And I'm so, so sorry that that happened to you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I told her we need to slow way down. Like it was nothing what we talked about as far as being able to process. I just need someone because by myself I just freeze with overwhelm. And with someone I have a hope to actually let go of a fraction and move through a fraction, even though it's not.
Does anybody want to share some tips or strategies for Michelle? You know, you have a garage full of items. We have 6 to 8 weeks. You know, what's a way that Michelle can get started in sorting those items?
Or
Yeah,
what
everyone's
makes you feel
putting on
stuck.
their thinking caps. Yeah.
I
There's
think, if you have the ability to just tackle some things that have no sentimental value whatsoever, right? Like there's not 100% of things that are sentimental in there. Sometimes getting started is hard. And a lot of times when we work with a client for the first time, if, there's a lot to be done, they're like, where do you start? And there's no right answer. You just start. You just pick a spot, you pick up an item, and you just start. When it's your own things, it's a lot more challenging because you're overthinking things. And I might come in and be like, you don't need this cardboard box, but you're like, well, I actually have this one thing that's going to fit perfectly in there when I pack. And so it's a lot harder when you're doing it on your own. But if you could try to, direct yourself towards the stuff that you can make really fast decisions on, once you start to feel a little bit of momentum, the rest of it kind of gets easier as you go along.
and having a body double, having someone there who can process with you, someone who's non-judgmental and supportive and empathetic, who can listen and you can honor the history of that item with the person. And then maybe you'll get to a point where you feel more comfortable making a decision about, are you going to rehome it, or is it going to be recycled, or where is it going to go? So I don't know if you have a friend or family member, or if you want to try working with another organizer who's going to respect where you want to start in the bedroom and go from there.
I think that body doubling is actually really underrated. So we talked about dishes, one of probably my second least favorite chore. My least favorite chore of all is putting away laundry. Ever since I was a teenager and had to start putting away my own laundry, it's been the one thing that I cannot stand to do. So if I let it pile up, I'll get on a video call with my best friend in New York, and she's always got a mess of something somewhere. So we pick a spot that we need to work on. We get on a video call together and we just talk and do it as we're talking. And somehow it just makes it so much easier. It's really an underrated tool.
Laura wrote that Laura uses Focus Mate for body doubling. Laura, could you tell us a little bit more about Focus Mate? If you're comfortable
Yes,
sharing.
it is it's a website where I get 3 free sessions a week of 25, 50, or 75 minutes. And I book a session and they pair me with somebody and that person shows up, and I have trouble getting out of bed in the dark, cold times of year. And I will get out of bed if I know there's somebody waiting on the computer for me, and I get exponentially more done if I start earlier in the morning. So I have 2 or 3 6:45 a.m. Focus Mate sessions a week, and that helps me just get started with my day. I'm usually working on my computer at that time, but I have done it where I've cleaned my kitchen while somebody else on the other end is doing something else. So that's just one of many tools. There's one called Tiimo, Tiimo, that has body doubling sessions at several times during the week that you can sign up for.
Nice. And you said Focus Mate gives you 3 free sessions a week?
I think it's 3 free ones, and then they have a paid program. There are people who use it every day for everything that they need to get done. I signed up for it through another group, and so I think it's free, but I'm not sure. I just know that I am not paying anything. And the folks who use it for everything they get done often are like ADHD, and they just need that body double to get things done. And so they'll just book really short sessions throughout the day.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sorry, could you maybe put in the chat or say the name of the second resource again?
Yes, it is Tiimo.
Oh,
and
thank you.
there's an influencer named Neely Kaimi, I think is her name, and she has body doubling sessions on there. She's neurodivergent and very helpful, very understanding.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing those resources.
I just looked online because I was curious enough to look right now. It is 3 sessions a week for free. And then after that, it's unlimited sessions for $7 a month.
Well, that's really cool. That's great. Thanks, Sarah, for looking it up. I might sign up for my invoicing to get up at 6 a.m. and work on invoices. It's a little, it's hard to get motivated to do that. So Michelle, did we address your question? I also, maybe if Jean from our team could put in the chat, we have a blog about how to right size sentimental items. And we also had a monthly webinar on that too. So we could put the links in for you, and we'll also send a follow-up email out to everybody who registered with the resources that are mentioned today.
We also have a blog on organizing through grief, which can be helpful. There's some really good stuff in there.
Absolutely.
I think the way that she focuses in this book on having a space that's functional and a space that serves you rather than you serving your space feels like a good place to start too. If you're packing up things, to start imagining the new space as like, how do I want to use it? What is going to be special? How can I set that up for myself in like a very special way? So that way, as you're going through things, it's like, well, now I have too many of these to actually be able to sit with them and do the thing I want to be able to do with them. Or does that make sense? Yeah, I feel like focusing on or being intentional about how the new space will be can be helpful too.
She did flip a lot of things on their head in the book. So instead of like feeling stressed or resentful, like I have all this laundry piling up, instead feeling grateful that you have so many clothes or you have things to wear. So I know we might feel overwhelmed by our things, but I don't know if that's helpful for folks to think, okay, I'm grateful that I have these things, or I have these sentimental items that have memories attached to them. And I've had so many good memories with of my dad or whoever it might be. Curious, what other questions do folks have, or what other things stood out to you in this book? And Laura wrote in the chat, there's a great book called Death Benefits on surviving your parents' deaths. They talk about going through your psychic legacy similarly to how you go through the physical items. Thanks, Laura. We'll check that out. And Michelle says, thanks so much to everyone for holding space for Michelle and for chiming in. So thank you for sharing your question. It's a common one that you're definitely not alone in facing. We often are working with clients who are under a tight timeline for a move, and there are a lot of sentimental items and not enough space on the other end. And so, yeah, we understand that it can be a lot. Andrea, you previously mentioned the 5 steps or yeah. So I'm flipping through here to try to pull them out. Do you remember oh, here we go. Do you want to
Yeah,
share a little bit more about the 5 steps? Do you feel comfortable?
Yeah, I'm not sure I memorized the 5 of them specifically. The first one was going through a room and emptying the trash. The second one was dealing with the dishes. The third one was dealing with the laundry. Fourth was things that don't have a place in your room. And the fifth one was things that aren't in the place they're supposed to be in. I'm sort of paraphrasing that, but she said, those are the 5 tasks you need to tackle. And if you tackle one at a time, you've made some progress. You don't have to do all of it. If you just want to pick up the trash in a room and get rid of the trash, that'll make you feel good. And then you can go back, and if you want to tackle the dishes, great. If you can't do it, that's fine too. Again, she's very compassionate and self-forgiving. And I think we all should be. We don't always have to have every dish picked up, especially if you're going through some stuff. It can be really hard to maintain that veneer of perfection that Instagram and Facebook have taught us that we should have, which is not true.
Thank you for sharing the 5 things tidying method, she calls it.
Yeah.
I like the steps because I feel like it is some pretty clear parameters. So I feel like for a lot of people, you could walk into a room and just sort of feel paralyzed by looking at, the piles or where to even start. So I feel like with these, you can walk in and just be like, okay, I'm only looking for trash. That's my only goal right now. And it just kind of gives your brain something to check off.
And Michelle writes 5 categories of things and nothing else: trash, laundry, dishes, things that have a place, and things that don't have a place. Thank you for summarizing, Michelle. That's great. And I remember rereading today that she encouraged you to focus on one task at a time, even if it's just like 5 minutes a day until all the trash is picked up. And then moving on to the dishes, like just gaining that sense of accomplishment and momentum. So I'm curious what you think too. She mentions that organizing and tidying are 2 different things. What did you think about that? And for folks who haven't read the book yet, does somebody want to kind of define that? Like, how would you describe organizing and how would you describe tidying? How are they different?
If I could chime in, I feel like usually what I do is just shuffle my stuff around. I don't actually quite get to the level of organizing, but when I'm cleaning, it feels like things like vacuuming and doing dishes and laundry might fall under the category. It's all the like daily maintenance or weekly, monthly, however often frequency of maintenance that it almost feels, sometimes you think too much about it and it feels discouraging because these are the things that you have to keep doing and you think, well, they'll just get dirty again, but you kind of need to use these things. And then organizing for me is a little bit more about systems and homes for things. And those are the places I really run into, you know, executive function stuff and decision making and like not really knowing systems and how to decide this lives here. And then you can like do quick tidies versus cleaning. So I might think more like not organizing versus tidying, because tidying maybe sounds like cleaning to me, but that's just a semantics thing. I don't know, 'cause I don't want to ramble too much, but that's like they feel like different categories of living with your space.
Here's what she says in her book. She says, organization means having a place for everything in your home and having a system for getting it there. Tidiness and messiness describe how quickly things go back to their place. Tidy person typically returns things to their home immediately, whereas a messy person does not. That's her definition. Some people are messy because they are not organized. She is.
Thank you, Jean, for finding that and sharing it. It's you know, interesting, these different layers and the semantics that it almost feels so circular. My brain's still trying to wrap around it.
But at one place in the book, she said something about, didn't she say something about there isn't no such thing as a mess? But maybe I'm getting that mixed up with lazy. I don't know. But she's talking about messy here.
I know, I'm trying to remember too. I do remember that there's no such thing as lazy.
Yeah. I guess obviously there is mess.
One quote that I have here is organization means having a place for everything, even if it's a messy place.
Oh, okay. And here's another thing. She says in conclusion in that little paragraph, in conclusion, being messy is not a moral failing. Tidy is simply a preference. Organization is functional and you deserve to function. How would you approach to functional organization change if you threw pretty out the window? Not sure what she means by that, but I think she means what's comfortable for you is what's right for you.
I can make my own work analogy on that because I work in tech, which is like I tell people all the time that there are functional websites versus there are pretty websites. So like no one will ever say that Craigslist is beautiful, but it does what it's supposed to do. Right? So I think that's the same thing she's saying here about your organization system. It doesn't have to look nice, it just has to do what it's supposed to do.
Probably right.
That's a great analogy. Thank you. Yeah, we focus on function here at Big Rocks. So if we're just using Amazon or Chewy boxes versus expensive containers from the Container Store or somewhere else, like, that's okay. They function, they work for you. Let's make sure that this system is going to be one you stick with. And then if you want to go out and buy pretty matching bins, you're welcome to do that. But let's make sure it works for you first.
Right.
Well, I'm curious, we have a couple more minutes if anybody had any last questions or insights that they wanted to share.
I would just put it out there if anyone wants to do any like Zoom body doubling encouragement of each other's sessions. I'm super down, so I'll put my email in the chat in case that sounds interesting. And I was grateful to have the space and the vulnerability and everybody kind of, you know, we all deal with stuff in different ways, and it's nice to have this. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Michelle, and for being vulnerable and sharing. And thank you for putting your email in the chat. I hope that we can find you a body double from our group today. And you also have the resources that we learned about from Laura. So thank you. Yeah. I hope everybody enjoyed the book. I mean, it sounds like overall, yes, 2 thumbs up, 1 up, 1 down. What are we thinking?
Yes, 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 yes.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, everybody. This was an experiment. I didn't know if we could ask folks to read a book and they would and come talk about it. So I'm glad that it resonated with you. And I hope that you took away some good nuggets and that it helps you in your life in some way or in your relationship with yourself or your perceptions about things. So thank you for being here.
Thank you
Next
for
month.
telling us about the book.
Yeah, you are more than
Thank
welcome.
you so much.
You're welcome. Next month on September 11th at the same time from 4 to 5 p.m., we're going to have a special guest named Carrie Halliday. She's a divorce attorney, and she's going to talk with us about how to navigate divorce, whether people are contemplating it or thinking about it. You know, what are some things that need to be thought about? And then our team will also chime in with, you know, how can we help support people through a life transition like that? You know, what are some of the things that we can do? So, and thanks for the confession, Sarah, that Sarah says that she didn't read the book, but now she's inspired to go read it. So yay, thanks, Sarah. I'm glad. You're not alone. Other people put that in a private message to me too. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. Have a wonderful evening and enjoy the book.
Okay.
Thanks
I
for the
did.
recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
y'all.
Thank you, Whitney.
Good to see you again, Paolo.
Oh,
Thanks for
hey.
being here.
Yep.